Good now, revolutionaries, and welcome to Rise Up After Dark. Today is Wednesday, July 30th. We're rounding out the month strong with our friend, three-peat guest, joining the Elite Three-Timers Club here at Rise Up After Dark. One of our favorites. He's the co-founder of Satoshi Action Fund. Welcome to the show, Dennis Porter.
Man.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, the round of applause. It's a classic. I really appreciate you guys bringing me back on. I'm glad I haven't bored you yet with all the political talk. You would have thought by now people would be bored of politics, but not in the crypto space.
No, still piping hot.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, on one hand, we're a bunch of cypherpunks and decentralization maxis, and on the other hand, we're just thrilled that Coinbase is partnering with Chase now, so that we can use the redemption points for USDC. You know, this is your place for helpful news, commentary, answers to your crypto questions. It's the show where we let our hair down. We do our own research. What is it? DYOR, do your own research. BYOB, and we have a little fun playing a little game here that in case
I'm going to start you off. Because for everybody in podcast land, no one saw that moment where Evan, as he said, let his hair down, literally let his hair down. So,
you know, I try to do that, but sometimes it works. I might have to give myself a glump though for saying do your YO, whatever I said. The game
you were too distracted by your hair.
Yeah, it's okay.
Is that every time you hear that sound, it means somebody speaking or somebody we're speaking about has gotten a point. And if you hear this sound, it means somebody speaking or someone we're speaking about has lost a point. And at the end of the night, whoever has the most points wins the game. And if we achieve an arbitrary number of points, then somebody in our audience and in the premium membership will win a prize. So let's get right to it. And if you are tuning in for the first time, let me just say, wherever you are, whenever you listen, thank you. I'm Evan. He's Alex, he's Will, and he's Dennis. And if you've got a crypto question, then feel free to leave it below. But I'd love to start for folks who may not have seen you before, Dennis. Would you just tell us a little about the work that you do in the crypto space?
Yeah, happy to jump in. And I got to say, first of all, your hair is hair worthy of making a distraction. So hard to beat it, really. Hard to beat it. So for folks that don't know me or not familiar with me, Dennis Porter, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Satoshi Action, which is actually a pair of nonprofits that work to educate lawmakers and regulators on the benefits of Bitcoin and digital assets, and also works to craft policies that we can pass into law. I mean, that's probably our main priority, main objective is like, how do we create long-standing, durable wins for Bitcoin? Because it's one thing to get a lawmaker on board, get them excited about what you're doing, but the end game of all politics should really be actually making changes. And that's what we're in the business of at Satoshi Action. We are in the business of making change and making a difference that is going to last not only this decade, but many decades to come. And that involves, changing the law. We need to be able to make sure we change the black letter law to ensure that we protect the right to be able to mine Bitcoin, to be able to self-custody Bitcoin, to be able to engage in peer-to-peer transactions, to run a node. We also want to be making sure that our states are utilizing Bitcoin to be able to protect themselves from runaway monetary debasement and inflation. Bitcoin is a very powerful tool for states to be able to protect taxpayer funds from inflation. And we have been able to show that through academic papers, but also we were the first organization in history to pass strategic Bitcoin reserve policy into law. We did it in New Hampshire. We played a major role in Arizona, and a big chunk of our draft legislation made it into the Texas bill. We're also engaged across the policy front at the federal level now, because one thing that we found is because of all of our success at the state level, passing these bills into law, and just to take a step back, of course, that's where we started at, right? It was really at the state level trying to make sure that the states were leading and had an opportunity to fight, because in DC, there was nothing going on. But of course, that dynamic has changed a lot. And I've seen, several of the people that are here on the call recently, Alex, I was listening to you break down the Clarity Act. I don't know when you ever thought you'd be breaking down like large regulatory packages as part of your content. You probably didn't think signing up for this work that you'd be doing that, but
he's been doing it regularly.
Yeah, I've been seeing the content. I mean, it's great stuff, right? I mean, at the end of the day, like you're setting the regulations that are ultimately going to guide the future of Bitcoin and digital assets in the country for generations to come. And the way that those regulations is super important. I mean, if you get it wrong, you end up in a situation where you either didn't come up with proper regulations, and the two potential downsides of that are either you went way too far to supporting whatever just like companies want, and you don't think about consumers, you don't think about frauds, you don't think about protecting people from scams, or you go the other direction and it's way too constrictive, like where you're of course you want to protect consumers, but if you go too far in your mission to protect consumers, you may just kill off the entire industry altogether. So policy really is a very strong balance. Regulation is a really strong balance of merging those worlds together. How do we do what's right for the technology while also doing what's right for the consumers, what's right for the American people, to make sure that we eliminate the shadows that a lot of the scammers and fraudsters operate in, while also not killing off innovation. So needless to say, our work and our efforts at the state level have been very effective, and we've passed 9 bills into law in 8 different states. We work really good with both sides of the aisle, Republicans and Democrats. And when we came to DC about a couple months ago, really to start really working on conversations with them, we just noticed there was a huge empty space where an organization like ours really didn't exist. You have 2 things happening right now. You've got the Elizabeth Warren camp, which is all the way on the other side on these issues. I hope one day, and I believe one day, she'll actually move closer to finding something that she'll like about this space. But right now, she's all the way on the other side. And then you have, the industry, which of course is valuable, but it's got its own very specific objectives. And when they engage with lawmakers, the problem that they find is oftentimes that lawmakers have a hard time trusting and believing what the industry says about the technology, because it's in their best interest to say great things about the technology. And we hear that time and time again as we've gone onto the Hill. Lawmakers and their staff constantly say, it's really great to hear from you because you're not all the way in the Warren camp, and you care about the technology, but you're not like here to make a quick buck. You're clearly not financially motivated from the sense that you work at one of these companies or you own one of these companies that's trying to make money. And nothing wrong with that. I love a great company. I think that we do capitalism the right way here in the United States, but they found us to be an extremely valuable voice on the Hill because we're in the middle. We care about making sure that consumers are protected, but we also care about the technology. And that has really quickly opened up doors for conversations for us to do the same thing that we do at the state level, which is craft the policy, work on building out the draft, work on finding a lawmaker and hopefully getting them to introduce it. And then of course, as we go through that process, ultimately helping them try to pass it into law. And time and time again, we found great open doors for us, and we're very excited about what's happening in Washington, D.C. right now because of that.
Well, you've got a lot of fans in the audience. Our friend Solemn says, thank you, Dennis and Satoshi Action Fund, for your advocacy. Our friend Adriano, Technically Web3, says decentralization must be protected. And we've got folks chiming in from all around the world, but some of them are in states where policy like this has been passed. Our friend Caddy is tuning in from Arizona and says, Arizona, wrong, feeling good about it. So it must be pretty exciting to feel like your work has an impact that hopefully you get to see often. But you mentioned Elizabeth Warren or some of the other people maybe who are resistant to this. Is your experience generally that these folks are resistant because you get the impression maybe they don't understand the issue, or do you feel like there's something else going on, a politicization of it?
I mean, usually it's a combination of a few different things. The 2 primary ones, of course, if you're on the negative side, is that they possibly don't understand it, or even worse, they believe things about the technology that aren't true, and might even be the opposite of what they believe about the technology. And then, of course, you have also conflicting incentives. So depending on what committee they're a part of, depending on what their priorities are in Congress, they may feel that crypto writ large is in conflict with like a very big program or package or effort that they've been building on top of for years. And as a lawmaker, I can understand why, if let's say, for example, if you're Elizabeth Warren and you want to nationalize the banks, you want to make it, instead of into a public entity, instead of, allowing the banks to be the ones profiting off of the average individual. I mean, this is kind of how they think about it, to be honest. But the banks are out there, profiting and gorging off of Americans, charging high interest rates, charging fees for overdraft fees. They have minimum balances, so it's hard to access. So her kind of like general worldview, from my perspective, I would, and I think some people would agree with this, is that she really wants to see the banks become something that's more of a public good and a public entity. And so if you come in and you're saying like, oh, don't worry, we actually don't need any of that, even though you've been working on it for like 10 years, Bitcoin solves all these problems, crypto solves all these problems. She's like, probably thinking, or her staff is probably thinking, maybe like, and none of this is verified, this is all just speculation. Sure. But it's a way to think about how lawmakers think. But her staff might be thinking, what? I don't believe that. Like we have our own way of trying to fix these problems. We don't need Bitcoin. We don't need crypto. In fact, look at all the scams. Look at all the frauds that are taking place in the Bitcoin, the crypto space. Look at all the energy Bitcoin mining is using. Clearly, this is not the solution. So there is a potential, I think, for Elizabeth Warren here for a very strong conflict with her objectives that aren't necessarily wrong. Like she wants to do good things for the American people from providing better financial inclusion, from not making it so easy for banks to profit off of Americans, but that her specific policy effort is in conflict with potentially some of the areas where Bitcoin and crypto play a positive role. So that's hopefully that was helpful context in the way that some of these lawmakers might be thinking about the space. They're not just inherently misinformed or that they hate it. Like they might have found that it's in conflict with their objectives.
You're total grifters.
And they don't change it because
they don't fucking have to.
That's William Quigley on the soundboard. I had to play it. I think some people have this misperception that, you know, there's some like shadowy money. Obviously, there's like lobbyists and there are very intricate relationships. But I think sometimes there's a lot of misinformation that like somebody is directly paying Elizabeth Warren or somebody else to actively oppose this thing. You know, and it's helpful to hear you say that because it's not necessarily that simple or that dark.
I think.
No, go ahead, please. I would love to hear your guys' views on it.
I'd be curious, just as someone who has a lot more firsthand experience with this, Dennis, because one of the opinions that I've had or the hunches that I've had is that because it doesn't make any sense that the progressive wing of the Democratic Party is anti-DeFi. It just straight up doesn't click at all. They should be the biggest proponents of DeFi in all of Congress, and they're not, which says something. So what does it say? And then, in my opinion, it was always just like, well, in my entire life, I have never seen what I would consider to be a genuinely open-minded, interested in learning Congress. I've never seen it. And it's tough, and I'm speaking generally. There are exceptions to every rule. But it always just kind of made me think, like, once you have something decided, it's hard to, like, figure out how to, in the public eye, admit that you messed up about something and then, like, come correct and change your mind. Because of course in politics, if you ever change your mind, whoever your opposition is will never let you forget it. And that becomes then fodder for the whole, they're a flip-flop or whatever. We watched Mitt Romney go through that harder than I think probably that was his entire like anti-Mitt Romney campaign was the flip-flopper. And I mean, and that's true for everybody. So that was always the hunch. And then speaking from listening to the experience of someone I know who knows Elizabeth Warren, was not so much like a specific crusade against crypto for the reason of hating it, but because of being blinded to the rest of it because of the prevalence of scams in some areas and thinking like, well, the fact that I'm being fought so hard on this means that I'm doing the right thing and I will die on this hill because I believe I'm protecting somebody regardless of whether or not that's misguided or not. And it's just sort of like the hill that someone got stuck on, because it's always really blown my mind that more progressives were not more into this, just because it spits in the face of what I think progressive is supposed to be.
Well,
I think they will, to be honest. I think progressives will come on board. I mean,
I would hope so.
Yeah,
I think just about everybody will eventually.
We're counting on you, Dennis.
I mean, this has been a major priority for me for a lot of time now, is working with progressives and working with Democrats, because at the end of the day, Bitcoin and also certain parts of the crypto space are very much in alignment with progressive values, and also it's a direct tool for them to achieve their objectives. And you know, obviously, at this point, all the conservatives are like, "You're insane." They love to use government to take away our freedoms and our rights, and like that's kind of just how they view them. But ultimately, like if you look back deep below the surface of like how they view these things and how they view the world, a lot of progressives really deeply care about protecting the small guy. Like that's a big part of really where they derive a lot of their values, and also how they think about policy and how they make decisions. And they really care about financial inclusion. They really care about access. And obviously you hear the word equality a lot, and providing equal access and equality across, different races. Doesn't matter if it's race, sex, sexual orientation, gender, political affiliation. Like that's all very important to them. And it's been tough to get to a good place on Bitcoin with many progressives, because there is a little bit of like exterior issues around Bitcoin that cause them to have a gut reaction to it. I think obviously the association with the crypto scams is a major problem, because that's right at the heart of their value set. It is, these scams and the frauds are coming for the average consumer, the average American who's just trying to save a little bit of money to put their kids in college, or to buy their first car, or to retire ultimately. And the crypto bros and their scams are coming in, and they are stealing and taking money away from these people and ruining their lives, which is actually happening. The problem is that we haven't had a good way of differentiating between what is really much a fraud and a scam, and what might be some like a business investment opportunity, and like where Bitcoin stands. And so it's really important that we have these conversations and continue to have those conversations. I will say also additionally that Trump has played a major factor in pushing progressives away from crypto writ large, which has been disappointing to see. I mean, for the first time ever, we really are starting to see like an anti-crypto constituency because of Trump's full embrace of crypto. And when I say full embrace, it's not just like, hey, let's work, let's do meetings at the White House, let's have a digital asset report, let's have a strategic Bitcoin reserve. It's also because of his family's direct investment into the space in the midst of the policy conversations. And it's making progressives really take a step back and reanalyze this space. And then also, when members of Congress and the House and the Senate are voting in favor of this legislation, they are going home to their constituents and they're hearing this. I mean, we're having these conversations directly with these offices. They're going home, and the progressives groups are like pissed at them, very pissed for passing the Genius Act, very pissed for passing the Clarity Act. Now, it's probably not the same for all lawmakers, but you can imagine a lawmaker from a very deep blue state, a senator from a very deep blue state, going home to their constituents who don't understand crypto, they don't understand stablecoins, and trying to explain to them, why you passed this stablecoin legislation as Trump is launching his own stablecoin, and what did you do to make sure that this isn't a way for him to just make a quick buck, right? And that's how they're thinking about it. So it's very dangerous. The dynamic we're in is very dangerous. And so but we are not going to relent. I have been fighting to make sure that Democrats and progressives understand this stuff for a long time. And we are starting to make headway with really, really, really key offices that are leaders on tech and that are leaders on the digital asset space. And so I can't share a whole lot on those conversations, but I am very optimistic about the future of what we can pull off. And at the end of the day, it's a big part of this. And I'll stop here. So you guys caught me. I haven't actually been on a podcast for like a month or 2 months now. So I'm like going full bore on you right now. So I apologize.
Stream of consciousness.
All of this is like new information. Like I've never said this on any show yet. So that's also why these regulations are really important, because if you get them right, we can eliminate the shadows that a lot of the scammers and the fraudsters are operating within, and ultimately drive more public confidence in Bitcoin and digital assets. And at the end of the day, like, it's great that our government is embracing Bitcoin, but we need the people and all the people to embrace Bitcoin and digital assets as well. And one of the ways that we can do that is setting up real legitimate regulations around the space that will protect consumers from runaway frauds and runaway scams.
One thing.
Sorry, Will, go ahead.
Like one thing that it's a problem, but it's natural. The first time I bet any of us, or the overwhelming majority of people, ever hear about Bitcoin or crypto in general, a larger crypto space, is almost always a negative source. I first heard about Bitcoin when the Silk Road was like, blowing up and being talked about on the news when I was in high school. That's the first time I heard about it. And most people hear about crypto for the first time because of scams or FTX, or, maybe it's a got rich quick story, right? That's like the most positive story that somebody hears when they first hear about this crypto thing. And then the very next story they run into is all the scams and the theft and, the pig butchering scams and, so on and so forth. So when you hear like the initial news of a new subject matter and it's negative, you immediately have a negative concept of the entire thing, right? And like with the first impression, it takes like 7 positive impressions afterwards to fix a negative one. You have to do that same thing with crypto too. I'm sure that's something that's taking into account with Elizabeth Warren. I'm sure the first thing she ever heard was a scam, goes, oh, this whole thing's a scam, and then built up a policy. And you can find all the evidence you want that crypto's bad, and just like you can with crypto being good, right? It just depends on what data pieces you're selecting and what you're looking at. But almost everyone's first impression of crypto that they get in a news headline is negative, but what ultimately to me is going to lead to everybody getting on board, or at least the majority of people, not everybody gets on board to everything, is just that the technology is so beneficial for everybody that will eventually always shine through, which is why this space keeps growing and growing and growing as time goes by every single year. So, but yeah, that's an issue, if you will, is the negative first impression that's almost first always left with people.
And then it runs into bad storytellers too. Because I mean, we don't have 20,000 dentists, unfortunately. And I see and listen to and watch and comment on and try to chip into conversations every single day from people with massive platforms that are just unbelievably unhelpful. And if that's the constant like barrage of info that you're receiving, if you do look into it at all, that's going to push people away too. Because I mean, to be honest, the concerns about the president and his personal investments and his family investments is completely valid. You can't look at anyone and say you are wrong to be concerned about that. You have to be concerned about that, just the same way that we have to be concerned about Democrats or Republicans in either house of Congress trading in the stock market. You have to be concerned. You have to question it. And so one thing that bothers me deeply, which Dennis, I'm curious to hear your take on, because I'm sure you run into this all the time, is that the farther and farther we get, the more and more nuance dies. And this is not a topic that you can talk about without nuance and advance in any way, shape, or form, because otherwise it just becomes incredibly divided. Dennis, I've heard you say this a million times. If you get to the point where crypto becomes a hyper-partisan issue, then it doesn't matter what you're able to advance under administration X or Y, Democrat or Republican, because then the motivation becomes, when the other party comes back into a position of power, undo what they did. And it doesn't end up being anything helpful. It just ends up being another thing that we're going to spar about for no reason other than I've landed on this side of the issue, perhaps arbitrarily. You've landed on this side of the issue, perhaps arbitrarily. We don't like each other for whatever reason. We're going to fight about it. And then again, stuck in the middle are people like us who get double tax, for example, paying income taxes and capital gains on the same money that you get paid for doing your job if you earn money in ETH or for whatever, you know? So that was a lot. But Dennis, my underlying question is, I'm sure that you run into a lot of instances and conversations wherein nuance is required to explain why something is valuable or something is not. This is a scam. That's not a scam. This is worth pursuing. This isn't, whatever. And I can imagine it's hard to have those conversations, especially in a political world, just because there's so many other agendas at play behind opinions.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. But fortunately, we are in an era right now where more offices are listening and are paying attention than ever before in the history of Bitcoin. And it's put us in a really great position. We're coming in at just the right time. Might have been good for us to show up a little bit earlier, but ultimately, because of the way that this legislation is moving through Congress, it is forcing these offices, whether they, maybe some of them are doing it, love doing it, maybe some of them don't, but either way, they're sort of required at this point to pay attention, which is important for us because we do need to get into the nuance of how the technology works. We do need to get into the nuance of the upsides and the downsides and the ways that it will align with an office and the ways that other things might not align with those offices. And the same is true on the policy. We really need to make sure that we get this policy right. Market structure legislation, the legislation that we pass or don't pass, hopefully we do, is critical for ensuring the future public trust in Bitcoin and digital assets here in the United States is secured. It's critical for ensuring that Bitcoin and digital asset companies and innovation stay here in the United States. And it's also really important to make sure that we are protecting ourselves from a lot of the scams and the frauds of the past, so that we don't see the entire industry from a financial perspective and from a external view perspective gets dragged down through the mud again. And that's why it's so important that we have these meetings to talk about how these different policies work. I was listening to your breakdown of clarity on your TikTok, which I thought was really good. But there are some concerns in the Senate over the Clarity Act, and then there's the banking draft that is coming through from the Senate as well. And people are asking a lot of questions, and it's great to be in a position with so many of these offices where we can answer their questions from a position, like I stated at the beginning, which is that we are a nonprofit, we're not a company, and we're not on the anti-crypto train, but we're in a position to give a lot more of an unbiased take on these types of structures that they're trying to put forward. And
can I ask you about that process really quick? The question. Just specifically about it. Just on receiving questions, I'm curious, just because you're not on the floor in a hearing getting getting questioned by any committees in particular, unless you are, and I just haven't seen it. How do they like submit questions to you via your office, or how exactly do those conversations go if you're not like able to be on the Hill all the time?
We are on the Hill. We're on the
I know
Hill.
you're there a lot, but I didn't know, like, is
Yeah.
it always just like you're going from office to office to office, like answering
Like a
questions,
Bitcoin
people
event.
It's a
email
lot of
you?
that.
Have you
It's a
heard the
lot of
word?
that. Yeah,
Okay.
if you heard the good word of Bitcoin, a Satoshi. Satoshi Action is here to tell you about Satoshi's word. Yeah, exactly. So no, a lot of this is direct conversations,
Okay.
and then of course there's calls and follow-ups and emails and all that as well, sharing resources, building resources, doing deep analysis of the legislation to give them our perspective on it and what we think is the upsides and the potential risks that might be inherent in those designs. And so it's a lot of meeting directly with those offices. We request meetings. The great part about it, again, and this is again going back to the story of how we started at the state level and we did all this great work, passing 9 bills into law in 8 different states. We set the benchmark for creating blueprints on digital asset policy across the country. We've done it multiple times. We've done a dozen academic papers, 6 of which have been peer reviewed. We've helped advocates write 250,000 letters to lawmakers. So we are like taken as a very serious contributor to the space when we come to DC, and that's part of the reason why when we set up these meetings and they go look us up, of course, if they don't know who we are, and they're like, okay, this group seems great, and then we come in and we're just like bang bang, like show that we know what we're talking about. I mean, I had one of the U.S. Senate offices tell me that it was literally one of the best meetings that they've ever taken in their entire time on this issue, and they were a major player in the crypto dialogue. So the reason why, though, is because again, there's the industry, which we love. The industry, we support the idea of keeping innovation in industry here in the United States. But then there's the anti side, and those are just polar opposites. And there isn't a whole lot of dialogue in the middle where it can be a little bit more down to earth and a little bit more unbiased. Now I have my own biases. I'm not going to try to pretend that I have no biases, but I don't have I'm going to make money or I'm going to crush this thing biases. And that helps in those conversations immediately to build credibility and trust. And part of it is also that we spent so much time meeting with lawmakers and helping them pass these bills into law at the state level that like we know how this process works, and we come in with a very credible record and ability to speak about these things, where right away we're just like bang bang, we're hitting trust levels. When you go in to meet like U.S. Senate offices or even House members and you talk to their staff, like they are just waiting for red flag triggers to go off in their mind to find a reason to not listen to you. And we are very, very good at avoiding the things that you shouldn't say because we know you shouldn't say them, or because they're just not what those people want to hear. But we're also very good at saying what you need to say. And it isn't, people don't know what an incredible tightrope you walk when you walk into these offices. If you say one thing wrong and you're over here, like you're permanently on the no-fly zone, so to speak. Now they might meet with you and talk to you, but they don't take you as a serious, credible person in the space. And so we try everything we can to put ourselves in a position to be the ultimate resource for these offices, so that ultimately we can help them come to the better, hopefully the superior policy outcomes on market structure, strategic Bitcoin reserve, you name it. We want to make sure that we're helping them as much as we can.
Dennis, what are the things that you are working on right now after achieving all those accolades? Like, I'm going to go back and clip from this episode when I do your bio again, passed Bitcoin laws in this many states, written this many letters. Like, it sounded like a ring announcement. It's impressive. And so then the question becomes like, what is the road directly in front of you looking like? Obviously, the passage of the Genius Act, even though it doesn't necessarily cross over with your particular advocacy, it's probably like a wind in the sail, at least in the form of people are getting more interested and curious. But are you continuing to focus your effort on some particular states? Are you trying to involve more people at the grassroots level? What do the next, say, 3 to 6 months look like for you? Because I know before elections, you probably want to get a lot done because a lot can change, even at a midterm, I would imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great question. So for us, a couple of major priorities are helping offices to get to a great position to work on market structure and pass market structure. The other major priority for us, which is a little bit more public facing, is our efforts to create a de minimis exemption for Bitcoin and digital asset transactions. We also want to see Bitcoin mining rewards be treated fairly. Right now, they are taxed twice. Double taxation on Bitcoin mining rewards is extremely unfair and unprecedented. We think the IRS should update its guidelines on Bitcoin mining rewards. We also want to see the same sort of update when it comes to Bitcoin transactions right now, or really digital asset transactions. right now, today, if you use foreign currencies, there's a $200 de minimis exemption. We think that that's beyond fair to extend
can
to
you just
Bitcoin
define
What
that
and
term?
is?
digital
Yeah,
assets.
I wanted to ask it. What is a de minimis exemption?
Yeah. Sorry, it's this
Okay.
lingo in
Also,
your
I'm just
crypto
proud
lingo
of.
speak now.
I'm just proud of that I said it right. I was great.
You did so good.
I was like in my head. I was like, I gotta ask that quick.
Yes.
Domino's pizza slice. No shit.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So a de minimis exemption is essentially a partial exemption for, think about it as a partial exemption for digital asset transactions or Bitcoin transactions. So instead of saying like, okay, we are going to give you a 100%, no cap gains on Bitcoin or digital assets, which would be awesome, but really is really out of the window of opportunity right now. And in politics, you'll hear this a lot in politics if you get into the space, is all about the art of the possible. Now, you want to be on the very edge and maybe just beyond the edge of the art of the possible. Like, you don't want to be over here like as a laggard being boring. Like we pride ourselves on like really coming up to the edge of like the Overton window essentially on these things and what's in the realm of possibility. And maybe even pushing a little bit beyond it. We've done a great job of that. In fact, everyone told us we were insane when we said we're going to pass strategic Bitcoin reserve legislation into law. I mean, they told us we were insane when I said I was going to get it introduced in 10 states. We got it in what's it, 20 states it was introduced in, and then we passed it in 3. With varying levels of involvement on those bills. Of course, New Hampshire being the first, we were deeply involved. It was directly based on our model. Arizona, we were highly engaged, a little less based on our model. And Texas, we were engaged, but it was used a good chunk of our model legislation. So just want to be clear because I don't want anyone to come after me for what they call credit ceiling in the crypto policy space. So at the end of the day, we want to see Bitcoin and digital assets used as money. And there's a very big hurdle to Bitcoin and digital assets being used as money, and that is the capital gains tax. Every single time you buy coffee, you buy groceries, you pay for rent, you name it, you have to track how much you spent or how much you bought your Bitcoin for. And then you have to track what you sold it for. And then you have to pay a capital gains tax, depending on whether it's short term or long term, on the difference between what you bought it for and what you sold it for. Well, that's all very complicated and very difficult. Of course, there's people coming out with good software to help, but it is very, very much a downward pressure on the ability for Bitcoin to achieve its second, I wouldn't say second most important, but its second feature, which you have Bitcoin as a savings technology and you have Bitcoin as money. And it's really good as a savings technology right now, but it doesn't operate to the best possible level that it could because you have these capital gains taxes. And there's other reasons too, from a technological perspective. But this is something we can change in the policy world today to make Bitcoin usable as money today. And that is to create a small capital gains exemption on transactions that are under $200 or 300. Some people have thrown around 600 as a way to start the conversation. And what that means is that if you go to buy coffee or you go to buy groceries under $200, that you are exempt from having to track the amount of capital gains that you would owe to the government on that transaction. So that is really helpful because it is such a diminishing reason for why, or it's such a burden for getting in the way for people to be able to use Bitcoin and digital assets as money. And we need to be able to unlock the full potential of Bitcoin, which is a mission at Satoshi Action. Not only do we want to make the United States the best place in the world for Bitcoin, we want to unlock its true potential. And we will never be able to do that as long as there is a capital gains tax on Bitcoin itself.
Just to boil that all down into a single sentence, you can think about it just with like, it's things that are too small to matter. And I don't really, it's like a negligible amount. Coffee
Alex
is a perfect
said
example.
one sentence and you're riding the line with a Guampoint right
Well,
now.
that was the first sentence. Then I'll back it up. And I don't like that I said too small to matter because then I realized that was out of touch.
A little snobbish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
how elite of you.
I know. That was not ideal. It's like receiving a gift card, or like you said, paying for coffee or whatever. I mean, think about how many times I can't think of how many times I've pinged a couple bucks over. Like look at anyone's like Venmo history, paying your friend for pizza or any of that kind of stuff. Like, there's a big reason that the tax thing is like that's like my biggest gripe. It just pisses me off to no end. It kills me that's a thing.
Well, you'll be happy to know we have a bill introduced in the state of Ohio that has a $200 de minimis exemption, and it's pegged to inflation.
Hell yeah.
Ooh, lovely.
I like that.
So,
I do like that.
and part of this game is like, that's why people, a lot of people discredit the state work. I know, of course, all of you are very supportive of it. There's a lot of people that are. But it's because they don't understand why we do the state work. The states are a lever tool on the federal government. And actually, in fact, in 2018, Bloomberg did a report on this, where if you see a flurry of activity at the state level, you see a lot of policy shifting at the state level, you tend to see a federal reaction to those policy changes at the state level. In fact, that is exactly what is happening in the crypto space today. The number of policies that have been attempted at the state level have accelerated dramatically over the last 3 years. We alone have helped introduce and directly worked on, since launching our tracking software, by the way, so I don't know about the first year, 88 different bills. We've passed 9 into law, but that's just us, just one group. Think about all the other groups. Think about California passing its own market structure legislation for the state, New York doing that, Louisiana did that. They all have their own registration systems that they've set up. It actually causes problems sometimes when states start to get into a position where they feel like they have to do something because the federal government isn't reacting. Because you really don't want to patchwork on things like, how do you register when you decide to launch a digital asset technology? Like, you don't want to have to go to 50 different states and have 50 different registration programs to be able to launch, your innovative product that you're trying to get out into the marketplace. So it's really important to federal lawmakers that they do not allow that to take off and happen. And so when you start seeing, California, New York, Louisiana, and now Illinois is trying to do theirs, and there's other states trying to do theirs, the federal lawmakers are like, shit, we got to do something here. Sorry, I don't know if you curse on your show, but we got to do something here to be able to stop these states from going the wrong direction. Alternatively, in addition to that, states matter a lot, because if the federal government doesn't do something, or they turn really hostile towards a space, you could end up in a situation where the states end up being like a patchwork of defense against an overly aggressive and hostile federal government. I mean, a really good example of this is sort of like what happened in the cannabis industry. You had the cannabis industry totally illegal, state and federal level. State and federal lawmakers actually working in coordination. This is why you saw the war on drugs be so successful against cannabis. But then eventually what happened was the states were like, well, we're going to actually legalize this stuff, and we're not going to enforce federal law on, cannabis enforcement. And that put in the onus on the federal government to have to be the ones to come in and do all of the law enforcement at the local level. And they just don't have the resources to do that. And so now you've seen a system where the states have essentially become like a bulwark of defense, where you can legally buy, sell, trade, smoke cannabis, and nothing happens, even though it's a federal crime still to this day, because the federal government is in a really bad position to actually enforce its laws at the local level. So the idea of this is where we kind of came up with this idea of like, well, if things start to get really bad, it's going to be really important to pass these bills into law to protect the right to self-custody at the state level, to make sure that the federal government isn't turning around, tapping on the shoulder of the state and saying, hey, let's round all these people up. Because if they are in alignment, they will do that. But if they're not in alignment, the federal government has to do that. And they tend to not do that because they just don't have the resources or the ability to do it. So anyways, I'll pause there. It was a big part of why states matter a lot to us, and how we use them as a mechanism to drive forward federal policy. And we also believe that de minimis exemptions, getting a cap gain exemption on Bitcoin and digital asset transactions, is right in that alleyway of like, let's prove this at the state level and let's show it can be done for those federal level folks.
If you're just joining us, I want to remind you that our guest is Dennis Porter, co-founder of Satoshi Action Fund, advocate to your favorite or least favorite government official for helpful Bitcoin policy, and according to Jesus, the stud in the blue suit. So congratulations for that. Mm-hmm. And you had asked if we curse on our show, and I will just let William quickly tell you.
Garen fucking teed.
On After Dark, it's a say what you want to, so don't worry. We're the FCC for it.
Dennis, I had a very specific question, and it specifically had to do with Texas and New Hampshire's strategic Bitcoin reserves that they passed. And it's not just Bitcoin, because if I remember correctly, if I read this right, and you'll know, so you will certainly correct me, but they can invest in any crypto assets that have a market cap higher than $500 billion, right? That's correct for both of those, right?
Well, I think it got moved to, there's an important factor on that. They have to be on average over 500 billion for 12 months. So it's not like they can just spike up and be included. Okay. Texas actually made an amendment on that. And I know that they turned it into 24 months. So even more robust. which means you have to maintain a $500 billion market cap for 2 years straight. I'm trying to remember if they also got the provision in there to raise it to 750 billion. We recommend 750 billion. Like, we don't really want this to be low. We think 500 billion is like the bare minimum.
Because that was my question, was like, why
Yeah.
500 billion? Why is that the magic number? Because Ethereum right now is at a market cap of like 470 or something. Like, you know, it's 4 or 440. It's close. It's like right about there. So, you know, like, why 500 billion? And then you say, you know, 750 billion is a better number to use. So, you know, like, what's the thought process behind these?
You know, it's a great question. For us, at the end of the day, you know, when we picked the $750 billion number to work off of, we wanted to set a very high benchmark. I would not say that we picked a number out of thin air. It was a combination of a few different decisions. One is, you don't want it to be so high that if you go into a prolonged bear market, that Bitcoin itself doesn't qualify. So, and when we were setting these numbers and choosing these numbers, this was back before there was like any significant major run up. The second is that you don't want it to be so low that these other types of assets, digital assets, are quickly qualifying. So that's a major consideration. And again, like, even right now, like, let's say Ethereum, we wake up tomorrow, it's at 500 billion, it will not qualify.
Yeah,
it has to take it has to be at that for a year
Yeah.
for New Hampshire, and it has to be at that for 2 years for Texas. But again, our opinion was it should be 750 billion, but it's ultimately the lawmakers that decide what's in these policies. We hand them the model, and they do what they want with it, and they make changes to it for a variety of different reasons. One of the probably most pressing reasons is there is an outside reason. There's an outside influence on their decision or their ability to pick that number. So as an example, like, it's nothing nefarious, but as an example, like, they might know that some of the crypto people that are not Bitcoin people in their state want the number to be a little bit lower for them to really get behind the bill. So they might be trying to build together a coalition of support for the bill. And in order to get it there, they have to make sure that the number is like, they're essentially in a negotiation process. And this happens across the space, state level, federal level. When you're working on policy, you introduce the bill. The dream is, of course, you just go and pass it and there's no changes. But oftentimes, lots of federal lawmakers, especially federal lawmakers and state lawmakers, want to weigh in on the process and say, hey, I'm generally supportive, or I'm really against this bill unless these changes are made. And you'll oftentimes find that other nonprofits oftentimes will actually be a big influence here, and they'll come in and they'll write letters and say, oppose unless amended. So they oppose the legislation unless it's amended to say, X, Y, Z. And, for the lawmaker in New Hampshire, I assume he made a calculation that he needed to bring the number down to be able to secure the coalition that he needed to get the bill across the finish line. So that's sort of where we thought about it. It's a balance of, don't go too high so you declassify Bitcoin, don't go so low so you classify things that shouldn't be in there. We think it should be 750 billion. And actually, I think the number should go up as every year that Bitcoin goes up, right, so to speak. But that'll be future amendments, I believe.
Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, monsters and machines, people and creatures of all ages, if you have a question, a suggestion, a suit recommendation, or something else for Dennis Porter, then let us know, because it's your show too. Alex and Will, as we wait for folks to bring their questions in before we get a final thought from Dennis, is there anywhere else that you really wanted to take this? Or Dennis, is there anywhere else that you particularly wanted to go? Since you haven't been able to share some of this stuff in a while, we want to make sure you get a chance to really shout from your megaphone if there's anything particularly important to you.
That's a good question. I mean, the one reason why we don't have any like major breaking news in this moment to share is because the states are on recess. Most of them are part-time, so they only meet from like January to May or maybe June. Some are even much shorter than that. Some only meet every other year. So I'd say about 95%, which is a rough estimate, of the states just aren't even meeting right now. So there's not a lot of work to be done. So folks that are really interested in this space will start to see policy pick up in a big way at the state level come December, come January. There is some highlight reel opportunities, though, that we've been able to generate for ourselves. We do have a bill in California. We're working with a great lawmaker there who really understands the space. He's chair of banking and finance. And we're going to be doing some cleanup work on unclaimed property, which might not sound all amazing to the average person here who's wondering what the hell is unclaimed property. Well, someone on this call, probably listening in, has at one point or another gotten a notice from someone who is holding some type of financial asset on their behalf, And if they send it to you because your account seems to have gone dormant, and what they do is they are required by law to send it to the state for the state to hold on to it. Now the state doesn't own it; the state just holds on to it, creates a public register, and makes it easier for you to access your digital assets or whatever property it is. In fact, funny enough, as we were working on this policy, I got one of these from Google saying I had some money left in some type of account related to Google, and if I didn't contact them with them in like 2 or 3 months, that they're going to send it to the state, and the state would hold on to it on my behalf until I go and I reclaim it. Well, the issue with digital assets, when it comes to unclaimed property, like let's say you leave your Coinbase account dormant for like 4 or 5 years, then the Coinbase is legally required to send your digital assets to the state for them to hold. Well, in that process, a lot of these people who have no experience with digital assets, treasurers, comptrollers, controllers, are like, I don't know what to do with this stuff. I'm just going to convert it into cash and then hold on to it because I know what to do with cash. It's easy for me to hold. I understand it. But that's a big problem. I mean, imagine if you forgot about your Coinbase account, you bought, a couple Bitcoin back when it was a few $100s, and you wake up and it's $100,000, and they converted it into cash at $1,000. Like you would be mortified. And so what we've done is we started to come up with a process where states can keep it in its native form. We hope to do it permanently. The state of California, through the process, it changed down to being held in native form for 2 years, but the bill doesn't go into effect for 2 years fully in effect. So there's time to change it and improve that timeline. But we want to see states that get assets, what they call escheated into their ownership or into their control, not ownership. Keep those digital assets in native form as long as humanly possible. And that's the bill that we're working on in California. In Ohio, we still have the bill live. They're a year-round state. California's a year-round state. The bill to do the de minimis exemption, to do some digital asset rights, Bitcoin rights. We do have a bill in North Carolina we're working on. That's a little bit of a covert operation. We do have a couple federal bills that we're working on that are a little bit of covert operations right now. But you'll be the first to know, and I have something more to share on those fronts. I will say the one interesting thing that's happened is they did the report today on digital assets from the administration, and they didn't state the number for how much Bitcoin they hold. And so now we are saying, well, you might have signed a paper to say that you created a strategic Bitcoin reserve, but I'm not going to count it as an official, fully, established strategic Bitcoin reserve until the public is aware of how much Bitcoin is being held by the federal government. So I'm tongue in cheek telling everyone that the states won the race, and the states were the first ones to create strategic Bitcoin reserves. I mean, we did pass it into law in 3 states, and Texas is allocating $10 million into it. So and that's all public. We don't know if the federal government actually really holds any Bitcoin according to the report that they put out.
Classic.
Yeah, exactly. We had a question. What about Colorado? Updates on Colorado?
Not a lot, unfortunately. We've tried it. We've had a couple near misses with them in a good way to try to do something there, but haven't been able to pull it off. I mean, that's half the country, right? We've gotten our bills introduced in 25 states, 50% of the states. So there's about 25% of the states where we just haven't been able to make the magic happen yet.
And so I saw that proposals were made in Montana, Wyoming, North Dakota, Pennsylvania, Florida, and then proposals are pending Massachusetts. My God, I can't even say the state I live in right now. Michigan, Ohio, and North Carolina. So the ones that are pending, those 4, which one do you think is closest based on, and in these things, I know these things can vary wildly because voting processes are different in each state, but.
It's been a couple weeks since I've checked in on the North Carolina one. That was the one that was the most live, I would say, and most likely to potentially pass this year. I need to go circle back with them. We are working on a multiple policy verticals in North Carolina, and so I would need to swing back and double check to see if we still have time on that one. But that would be the only one that off the top of my head that I know is ready to actually get done. Massachusetts is not going to happen this year. Florida is not going to happen this year. What was the other one you said?
For pending, it was Michigan and Ohio were the other 2.
Oh, Michigan. Yeah, I got to check in on that one too. I mean, this is the good thing and the bad thing about Satoshi Action, about where we're at right now, is like the amount of work that we are doing. I mean, to be honest, it's getting insane. We're actually having to expand the team because we just have way too much work and we don't have enough bandwidth. Fortunately, AI helps a lot, but there's only so much you can do with AI. So we're bringing on regional directors. We're going to be hiring a lot of staff, and we've had major significant investments made into Satoshi Action recently. So we're very excited about the future of the organization. And that's why I'm less in touch with every single little policy that we're working on these days.
Well, if the next time you're on the Hill doing some outreach and education, you need someone to get you coffee, call me. Because
Hey, I'll do a live stream from the Capitol.
that would be awesome.
That'd be
But
fun.
really, what Alex is saying is take him in your suitcase because
Yeah,
he can
bring
wear a
me.
suit just like you. And we do want to become more involved where the lawmakers are. We have made it to
I
do
would fly
you know,
myself there. I'll-
to be on the Hill. We've got to go back and talk to Hester Peirce, but we also have friends with connections to a couple of other crypto-friendly Congress people. Ro Khanna is on the list, and we just think it would be a good public service to be able to. Right now, we're bringing the conversation to the people as much as we can, but we always want to do more. And so he's very serious. That
I desperately want to get up
would
there.
buy your coffee.
I love
He-
that.
He might talk your ear off about the tax app that he's vibe coding, but you know.
We all need to have more vibe, and especially vibe coding. So definitely we should look on some way that we can collaborate in Washington D.C. There's a different ways of approaching these conversations. There's some meetings where it's like I want to say it's like closed door, but like
Definitely.
it's important to keep the privacy of those conversations within those offices. But there's a lot of stuff that we're trying to do where it's less high stakes, so to speak. I am trying to organize some things, so they're not public yet. So we'd love to share with you privately on what those are, so that we can get you involved. And also, just so you know, there's going to be a conference, BTC in DC, coming up September 30th and the 1st of October. I am trying to potentially work on something for that conference. I'll be there for sure. So I would put that on your calendars as something to join in on, because that'll really, I would say, give you a taste of DC. A lot of lawmakers will be around, a lot of people talking about policy without having to do the begrudging work of like walking from office to office. Because I don't know if you've walked from between those offices before, but there's a lot more distance between them than you would love to
There's
believe.
a lot more distance.
Yep.
Yeah. Like if I remember the first time I went to Washington D.C. and I saw the mall, where all the monuments are at, and I was just like blown away how far the distances between the Lincoln Memorial and the Capitol. I walked it once or twice, and I was like, I'm never doing that again. It's bikes for me from here on out.
Luckily, DC has all those scooters now, so it's much easier.
There's bikes and scooters and stuff everywhere. It's like practically littered with those things now.
Yeah.
DC feels like a Segway city to me.
You would think so. I
No,
never see them though.
Yeah, you don't.
That's a relief, honestly.
Segways died a long time ago. I think there's only one business that's keeping them alive in Boston, and that's it.
No, dude, you should. In Savannah, we have literally horse-drawn carriages and Segways. We don't have scooters. There's no bikes. It's Segways and horses.
I'm going to move
I
to
gotta come
DC
visit.
and
I'm
start a
dead
tuk-tuk
serious.
business. One of those little like bicycle carts where you get on the rickshaw on the back. I feel
yeah.
like that would be the vibe.
There's people that do stuff like a variation of that in DC. Like there's these guys that ride around in these old Model T looking carts, and they have that sort of rickshaw or whatever, however you say it, on the top.
Rickshaw.
With the
Yeah.
rickshaw, like it's like just a covering on the top, and they're like micro, they're small. They're motorized, so you're not having to pedal, but it's essentially you're getting the same sort of experience. They do them for the tours around the Capitol.
Well, we have a lot of people who've expressed an interest in helping. They say they're going to write, they're going to call, they're going to watch for the advocacy. And I do have one or two more quick rapid fire questions. This one is you don't have to answer. You can plead the fifth, but folks want to know, is Dennis buying or selling Bitcoin right now?
I don't sell.
You get one guess.
You get one guess. Yeah, I think
I
you all know
don't
what it is.
sell.
It's
that's
the only thing I own. I'm not selling any of it for anything else.
That's
No.
a 5-point answer.
Allergic
I
to
mean, I
selling
have
Bitcoin.
like cash for my bills and
Sure.
equity in my house. Like I'm not so much of a maxi that I like sell my chairs and stuff like that. But Bitcoin is the only crypto asset that I hold on to.
Yeah.
Amen.
Amen, brother. I never sell. Absolutely. I'm allergic to it, is what Alex always says.
I just don't like having to think about when I'm going to sell my crypto, because like the vast majority of the other cryptos are like, they're like a speculative play. Like you don't really know whether they're going to be the top player for what they're trying to accomplish. Like think of like Ethereum, Solana, XRP, like Tron. Like in a lot of ways, like these are all platforms that are competing for business to be on their platform.
Mhm.
And like I just don't like have any direction on who's going to survive, like who's going to have the vast majority of the stablecoin volume, who's going to have the smart contract volume, who's going to have the games, the NFTs, everything else. Like I just have no way of determining what that is. And I think that anybody who thinks they know that, God bless you. Like I don't think you really know. I think it's just like an educated guess, because like 5 years ago, it was clearly Ethereum, and everyone was like, Ethereum's got it, and they have this massive market cap, and they really leaned into decentralization. And then like Solana came along and like ate all their lunch on a lot of ways, and Tron, and now Ethereum is like a fraction of what. Now, of course, it's regaining footing, and I get that. But my point is, these are technologies that are, they're not a business, but they operate a lot like a business does. Like they change, they move around, they try to capture markets, they try to increase or decrease decentralization. They try on all these different ways of approaching the technology so they can grow their market share. Like not a company, but sounds a lot like a company. Like Bitcoin is not a company. It does barely ever changes. It's the same almost every single day that you wake up. Even mild changes to the code are like fought like viciously, like with the whole op return debate that's taking place right now. I don't know if you guys have
Can you
weighed into
briefly
that.
summarize that for people? And also another one you might want to touch on that I think people are concerned about a lot in our comments is quantum resistance.
Yeah,
Like,
happy to chat. So quantum, just to knock that out of the park real quick, is definitely a concern. I don't think it's not as dire as like the doomers make it out to be. Like the doomers are like Bitcoin's screwed, sell your Bitcoin, get out of Bitcoin. Quantum's going to break Bitcoin. Partially true, because quantum will break Bitcoin, but it will break everything that uses cryptography, which is literally everything. Yeah, it's everything. It's your bank account.
And anyone who's like, get out of Bitcoin, it's going to get broken and get into what? Cash? The dollar?
Yeah, you need to be in physical cash and physical dollars and physical gold probably at that point. But there's a solution, and it's called post-quantum cryptography. So the thing that we all have to figure out is how to transition across that big divide, because it's going to be a really critical policy conversation. Like one of the really interesting things that people talk about is like, what are we doing with Satoshi's coins when we like change the signatures or we change the cryptography around Bitcoin? Like, are we just burning them? Like, are we keeping them and like redistributing them to devs or to like the miners? Like, what are we doing with it? And it's a simple question, but there's very strong opinions on how that should be managed and what should be done with Satoshi's coins. So because you can't, when you migrate to a new system, like all the old wallets like won't work anymore. And so it's like, well, should we like code in that we're going to do something with these coins or just like let them go away forever? So that's a very big question, important question on how to make that transition. But there is a solution. And eventually when it becomes so obvious that we can't wait anymore, one of these solutions is going to, head to the front of the line, and that's going to be what we go with. And hopefully we make the right decision on how to manage that changeover.
And you mentioned Opera.
Op return. Yeah. So this, and also the quantum thing, I think it's really important to put in context, is all part of a greater policy conversation. I know we talked a lot about governmental level policy and how to make changes to government policy, but we also have policy in Bitcoin, which is enforced by the code in Bitcoin, enforced by the nodes, and enforced by the miners, and I would say legislated on by the developers, right? Think of the developers like your legislatures. They're the ones that are crafting. Yeah, they're the ones that are crafting the policy for Bitcoin. They go and they turn around to the node runners, they turn around to the miners, they turn around to the ecosystem. They say, this is what we want to do. And then they have to get enough of buy-in from the node runners and from miners to be able to hopefully push up that policy forward. So I would say that like, it's hard to do a comparison for miners, but if I had to say, the miners are like the executive branch, and then the nodes are like the judiciary. So you have these like three different branches of governance, not government, in Bitcoin. And there's a really two big changes that are being talked about right now. One is the quantum thing, which is on the horizon. Or I wouldn't say if it's on the horizon, it's like over the horizon, but it's coming quickly. And then you have this op return one, which is like right in our face right now. Like we are having this being debated and talked about and pushed through as we speak. The op return, what it does is there is a small space on each transaction, and this is a non-technical. I'm not a technical guy, so I'm gonna try to explain it as simple as I possibly can. And I might get it a tiny bit wrong, but directionally I know I'm correct.
Okay. Sure.
So there's a little bit of space that they created for arbitrary data on each transaction. In the past, it was 40 bytes, very small, and it enabled like unique features for Bitcoin, but it didn't like open the floodgates to do a bunch of crazy stuff on Bitcoin or to like turn Bitcoin into Ethereum. Eventually, Core, which is the dominant implementation for nodes. So if you're, see if I can explain this as quick as possible without getting technical.
I mean,
if you don't know what a node is, you should learn about it very quickly because it's a very important part of Bitcoin's infrastructure. the nodes keep a full history of all of the Bitcoin transactions. And every time there's a new transaction or any attempted change to Bitcoin, the nodes are there to say, okay, this is in alignment with the rules that I see, or yes, this is a valid transaction, and I will propagate that to the network. So if you try to process an invalid transaction, the nodes will reject it and your transaction won't go through. The same can be said for the miners, but technically the miners could attempt to process an invalid transaction, I believe. Or if you try to make a change to the code, like you do something outside the consensus rules, then as you're trying to work on Bitcoin or use Bitcoin, the nodes can reject that as well. But generally that's all done through like when you try to attempt some type of transaction. So they go from core, so going back to core. So core is like a software layer on top of the nodes. And they controlled like 99% of all nodes, or had 99% of all nodes. Control is a wrong word to use here. They might get offended by that. They have a software that sits on top of like 99% of the nodes. And there recently was a conversation about changing the op return limit on these transactions. Core had already moved from 40 bytes to 80 bytes. That enabled a few more type of features on Bitcoin. But again, it wasn't the floodgates being opened up. And then all of a sudden, out of sort of left field or sort of nowhere, perceivably, I'm sure they were talking about these things in the doldrums of the, smoke-filled rooms with the developers. But all of a sudden, this idea popped out let's raise that from 80 bytes to 1,000 bytes. And then eventually there's also a push to make that a permanent change so it can't be adjusted. And that can all be done through mempool policy, which is actually not a part of the consensus rules. So this is outside consensus. So Core was able to say, we are going to change the byte limit from 80 to 1,000 bytes, and we will implement that across 99% of the network. So there's really no way anybody can do anything about it. They'll set that to the default, I should say. And then they have plans, they said this themselves, to remove the ability to change that altogether. There's a lot of debates over whether this is good for Bitcoin's protocol, whether this is good for the network. It's what you would call a technical debate, and both sides have good arguments. And I'm on the side of not doing it, so I would say that I believe Core has some bad arguments, but of course they say the other, the anti op return increase people have bad arguments too. Like it's a back and forth. Like it's a vicious back and forth.
Dialogue. Yeah.
Like anybody who comes in who doesn't understand anything of what's going on is going to be like, I'm just going to stay out of this conversation. It's way too technical.
Yeah.
Where I have a big problem, and again, I'm not a super technical person, so it's even difficult for me to even talk about this issue because it is so deeply technical. The problem that I have, though, is not on the technical front. I should say my main concern is not on the technical front. My main concern is that we are entering a situation now where you're almost having like a constitutional crisis. The lawmakers, the developers, the policymakers have said, this is what we're going to do. And when they did that, there was actually a huge amount of backlash on it from people who are node runners and who care about how their node is managed and wanting to make sure they have full autonomy over their node. And instead of saying, you know what, let's wait on this, we need to talk a little bit more about it, or maybe let's dial it down a little bit, because maybe we don't go to 1,000, maybe we go to 250 or 500. You typically would enter a negotiation period on policy, just like you would in the real world, not just in the digital world. We try to get to a consensus, right? Consensus is important, whether that's at the government level or at the Bitcoin policy level. But instead of saying okay, I see your concerns, let's either slow things down or let's dial it back a little bit. They were banning people from the conversation. They're blocking people from the debate, and then turning around and being we don't care, online, literally being we don't care if you don't like it. We don't care, switch to some other implementation. Well, there really was no other implementation. I mean, there's some fringe ones that existed, but they were 99% of the market.
Yeah.
And that pissed a lot of people off. And I think the big way that I want people to take, the big takeaway I want people to have from this is that there's these three different branches of governance: the miners, the node runners, and the developers. And this is essentially the developers telling the one branch of the governance to screw off. This would be the president waking up, or I should say, this would be the Congress waking up and they're saying we're going to pass this law, and the Supreme Court's like, that's unconstitutional, and they're like, we don't care, we're doing it anyways. That's essentially what's happening right here. Like they have found this loophole to make this change in a way where technically they can, but it's a big problem.
Well, and
for
really,
the
we should say,
consensus
like,
of
unlike legislative bodies in our government, they have a sort of unilateral power because they are the developers. They're the technical arbiters of this thing, and they're the first ones to create it. You don't want to play with us? Then fine, build your own thing. You know.
What exactly, and that's a great way to say it, and then it helps me to make another additional point on top of that to build on that is that it made node runners realize that it is a mistake to have only one implementation, and that we are in an untenable and undefensible position if we continue to run core 99% of the time. And this is why Bitcoin Knots, which is an alternative implementation that doesn't reinvent the wheel, it takes 99% of the code base of core, right? Every time they come out with a new one, Knots comes and says, we're going to take 99% of that, but we're just going to make these small tweaks to it. It sounds a lot like the Republican and Democrat Party, if you ask me, myself. And so what happened was, because it had this like only these mild changes in the areas that were really important, like around op return, protecting decentralization, you name it, Knots has kind of taken off. And when I say kind of, it's unprecedented, the amount of adoption that we've seen in such a short period of time. Yeah. We went from a 99% to down to 83% in the matter of, a couple months, 2-3 months. Wow. And they haven't actually even put the change through yet. They haven't actually forced the change through in Core 30, which will be the most up-to-date version of Core. And I think you're going to see a lot more people switch over. In fact, Start9 Labs, who is a company that builds the node, they don't do the software implementation level. They just have the node, and there's like a suite of products that they build around the node itself. Sure. They said they had like record-breaking sales of people buying their product because Start9 kind of came out and said, hey, we're making it easy for you to switch over to Bitcoin Knots and move away from Bitcoin Core. And they just said that they just can't even handle the amount of people that are calling and asking how to switch over to Bitcoin Knots.
And I just want to make sure I'm understanding this correctly. The reason those node operators would want to do that is because they're seeing the imbalance of power that those developers have to basically write the software, and everybody runs it already. If they were to shut down the network as operators to band together, that would hurt them too. So they're looking for options to expand their own power, to have a voice in this fight by having nodes that operate different software.
Absolutely. Yeah. Some important context there on like why people are doing it. There's a variety of different reasons why. Like, I don't think very many people actually think about it the way I do as much, because I'm so politically oriented that I see how this is a very political moment in Bitcoin. Most people are doing it because they just view it as like an FU kind of moment. Like, how dare you tell me what to do? Like, I'm going to do whatever I want with my node. You can't tell me what to do with my node. I control my node. I'm free, kind of thing. Which I can appreciate that viewpoint. Then there's another group of people who are like, we don't want to see this expansion and validation of what they would call spam on the network. We don't want Bitcoin to turn into Ethereum. So we're rejecting that change because we're not against changing Bitcoin. We're just not willing to bend the code of Bitcoin to enable like your personal business opportunities or other opportunities that are interested in seeing this change take place. And so they don't want to store spam on their node, which is a resource cost on them. And albeit it might not be a lot today, but this is a slippery slope where we go from, okay, it's, bare minimum $200 to own and operate a node today, bare minimum. I mean, you are like building it yourself, bare minimum here, to, being $1,000 to being $5,000. And what happens, and this is one of my secondary reasons for being really concerned about this. First is I think this is an attack on the consensus around Bitcoin and making sure that nodes are able to participate in consensus. And then I think it's an attack on decentralization, because the more and more stuff you put on Bitcoin, the more bloated the blockchain becomes, the more bloated the ledger becomes, and it becomes more difficult for people to participate. So in some ways, it's very similar to how Democrats view access to voting, right? Like, we want to make it, like, their ethos is like, make it as easy as humanly possible. Like, we don't care, like, lower the barriers, allow everyone to vote. We want like the most democracy as possible, right? Yeah. Whereas Republicans, of course, are like, we're concerned about protecting the truth of the vote, right? The integrity of the vote, right? So, which of course are both valid conversations. But I'm, when it comes to Bitcoin, a decentralization maximalist. And I believe that we must ruthlessly defend the decentralization of Bitcoin. So even like one step in the wrong direction, to me, I view as a very bad step and a direction of heading down the slippery slope of damaging Bitcoin's decentralization, which I view damages to decentralization is a permanent damage. I don't think you can undo the damage, because the moment you put bloat on the blockchain, it is there permanently, indefinitely, and you cannot take it back out. Like, you can't go back and reorg the chain, the Bitcoin chain. So a lot of people view that as a very big problem, because as it becomes more difficult to run a node, it becomes less likely that people will start nodes, that'll continue to run nodes, and then you have a breakdown of nodes or people operating nodes, which ultimately makes it much easier to co-opt Bitcoin in the long run. I'm not saying that Bitcoin is going to collapse. You could akin it to very much like how a lot of times our political system is co-opted by financial interests. Like, very much the United States government is beholden to a lot of special interests, a lot of big money interests, because of things like Citizens United, where we opened up the floodgate and allowed there to be unlimited money spent. Now, of course, I have friends who disagree with me and think that Citizens United is great, but you can see now, I think, for those of you that might be listening that are politically oriented, there's a lot of parallels between what's happening in Bitcoin and what's already happened in the real world. And we know what is going to happen if we head down these slippery slopes. And we have a choice to make on whether we're going to allow that to happen a second time in Bitcoin policy.
What a great lesson. This is, I'm really glad you took time to break that down, because I don't think a lot of people are aware of like the internal discussion that happens to make the Bitcoin protocol live, or any of these networks.
I know I'm not.
I wasn't aware
into it enough.
I wasn't aware of any of that going on. And I'm more connected to the space than most.
It's not hit the boiling point yet. I'm actually one of the more active participants in the conversation, because they're hitting on two things. Well, really, it's really centered around one thing that's incredibly important to me, which is the decentralization of nodes, access to nodes. This is ultimately why in 2017, even though the block size wars was hotly raging, why I firmly sided with small blocks, because I ultimately decided that it wasn't worth risking the loss of decentralization to open up the blocks and allow more to be built on Bitcoin. I know there's a lot of desire to see things be built on Bitcoin, but I think that we can achieve that future, which we all know that there's going to be things that are done on Bitcoin that are not being done today. We can do that by being good for the technology, and also good for the innovation, and also good for the nodes. We don't just need to be like, well, screw the node runners. They're our roadblock. Let's just get rid of them. We don't need. The crazy part is these developers are coming out and saying they don't even run nodes. It's like, so you don't appreciate like Bitcoin and what it has to offer and what it's really all about. At the end of the day, it's a grassroots, bottom-up technology, not driven by the developer elite. It's, of course, we care about their input and we appreciate their sacrifice because they're volunteers. But at the end of the day, if they are going the wrong direction, they have to be called out by somebody.
Yeah, at the end of the day, the most powerful and useful thing about Bitcoin is that it's so decentralized that nobody can own it, right?
That's exactly right.
It's the asset outside of everything else. Yeah. Financial institutions, nation states, the powerful, the elite, they always get the things first. Typically, Bitcoin is a grassroots movement available to anybody, for anybody, built by the people, for the people. And that's what makes it valuable. Yeah. And I just go like, my thought has always been, initially when I saw people building on Bitcoin with, NFTs, ordinals, and all that kind of stuff, my first initial reaction was like very much so against it. And then I was like, whatever. And now I'm just like a little bit slightly against it. I'm like, let people do what they want. Yeah. It's part of the ethos of Bitcoin and crypto is do what you want with this, because it's built for you, by you, use it the way you want. But my personal take is let Bitcoin be Bitcoin, let it be the asset that breaks down all these walls, and then also you have your Ethereum and your Avalanche and your Solana and your HBAR and your everything else, your Say, your Sui, everything that will always do NFTs or DeFi or tokenization of real world assets faster and cheaper than Bitcoin ever will, because Bitcoin would have to change just so much drastically to, if you wanted it to be a platform to build stuff on, that it's going to be so far behind everybody else. So let other folks be the decentralized application layers and networks and marketplaces, and let Bitcoin just be Bitcoin. And that's a beautiful thing in and of itself. It doesn't need to be anything more.
I'm super torn, to be honest. And everything that I know about this, I know from reading your posts on Twitter, Dennis, largely, and then just being annoyed that I don't understand everything, and then I go and sit there and read about it. And
yeah, I did that about 20 times before I got to this point of having an opinion. So
yeah,
I was right where you were just 6 months ago.
Well, the forums are not very accessible.
No, not at all. And I mean, I have a huge issue. If I read something and I'm clueless, I'm like, that. Even if I'm not interested, it pisses me off that I don't understand it. So I have to go sit there and try to figure it out. But super, super torn because, like, my personal opinion, I would probably agree with what you just said, Will. That like I feel like Bitcoin can be Bitcoin. Bitcoin is great. We don't need to. It is what it is. It doesn't need to be anything else necessarily. I don't really care about anything else. But at the same time, if I try to take to heart the true ethos communicated to us in the white paper, I'm speaking about it like it's a holy text written, etched in stone tablets.
Down to us one Satoshi topped the mountain and the clouds parted.
But I mean, how far off are we though, really? To say that, but if I try to think about that, then also part of me is like, okay, but if what it represents is this decentralized freedom for thing, this entity, then who the fuck am I to tell someone that they can't do something with it? Because that spits in the face of the whole point.
Yeah, I hear that argument a lot, and I agree with you in some ways. But at the end of the day, like, Bitcoin is filled with rules. And it is filled with things it tells people not to do on a daily basis. And the only reason that, in fact, Bitcoin is the most tightly regulated monetary unit on planet Earth. It's incredibly regulated when it comes to the block size. It's incredibly regulated when it comes to the supply. And then, in fact, by regulating Bitcoin and controlling what you can do with it, you actually allow it to be much, much more valuable. Without the block size and without the 221 million supply hard cap, Bitcoin would be totally worthless. So there is a lot of value in constricting what we can and can't do with Bitcoin. And in fact, creates more value and you could say even more freedom for people to use it more strongly the way it was intended. Like, if we really want Bitcoin to be used as money and we really want Bitcoin to be used as a savings technology, any other feature that you add onto Bitcoin potentially puts those features at risk. Not saying it will always happen. In fact, that's why the balance of policy is so important on how do we make sure that we can continue to use Bitcoin the way that we all know that it was created for. I'm not saying I'm 100% against it being used for other things, but we all know why Bitcoin was created. Like, Bitcoin was created to be untouchable money that no one can mess with and that you can transact it anywhere in the world and no one can stop you. Now, if we decide that also somehow it makes sense to allow there to be some DeFi on Bitcoin that doesn't put those features at risk, like, I would be open to those conversations. But ultimately, when you're dialing it back down in to like freedom on Bitcoin and enabling, people to do more on Bitcoin, it's a conversation that's been put forward by a lot of the people that are trying to make sure that the opportune stuff goes through and that ordinals continue to exist on Bitcoin and that other things continue to exist on Bitcoin. Because at the end of the day, when ordinals came about, it came about through a bug. Like, it wasn't even supposed to be on Bitcoin. We did the SegWit change to help Lightning to be able to be brought about. Like, here's a quick example. Like, right, like, we came up with a way to magically change Bitcoin. We came up with an incredible engineering solution to help get Lightning live, and Lightning's provided incredible value and helped actually embolden the mission and drive the mission forward of making Bitcoin a payment system and a way to transact as money. But the one thing that came with that, despite all of the people looking at the code, they did not notice that it could be used to put ordinals on the chain. And I'm not like some big anti-ordinal guy, like, to be clear here, right? But it was a bug. And what did they do? They decided to not fix the bug. And so then, because that bug continued to go on, now ordinals are sort of like a permanent part of the space. They don't add any value to anyone other than the people using ordinals. It doesn't increase the mission and the ability of Bitcoin as money. And so what they should have done is they should have closed the bug. But instead, they've allowed it to proliferate. And now it's like turning into this conversation, well, you should let people be free with Bitcoin, do whatever is allowed on Bitcoin. But it was never intended to be used that way. And not a single person who wrote that code or put that code out there knew that was actually what was going to happen. In fact, the guy that actually wrote the code is the one driving the conversation for why we need to leave core and go to knots. He's actually the one that is the maintainer of knots. And for years has turned around and said, we need to fix this. We need to fix this. In fact, there's a number of different security loopholes and problems with core that exist today that are not being fixed, that Bitcoin Knots has fixed or has pointed out. Or there's other people that I talk to all the time who are like, man, there's all these problems in here that nobody even knows about. Not to fearmonger it. It's not like your Bitcoin's going to go away or anything like that. But there's important updates to Bitcoin that could be made that are simple changes that just aren't being done. And I don't know why, right? Like at the end of the day, it's like, why aren't these simple changes being fixed? Why do the incentives seem to be misaligned with Bitcoin? You have Bitcoin developers telling me they don't run nodes. And then you have them telling me like, we don't care what you think. You have them invested into business opportunities that will directly benefit from the changes that they're trying to make. It sounds a lot like the reasons why we get pissed off at our lawmakers. We're like, you're not doing what we want you to do. You're doing something that's clearly some sort of hidden benefit or incentive. I'm not saying all the developers are like that at core. I think there's plenty of them who are obviously doing a great job, but there's something going on. And I think people can sense that. And that's also what's driving a lot of the people to ask the question of like, why is this happening? And why is it so important to you that you would shove it through and risk shoving so many people away from core in order to pull it off, instead of like dialing back the rhetoric and just calming down and saying, let's have a better conversation about these things. But that never happened. We node runners and people that care about what changes on nodes were never allowed to be part of the conversation on what actually is changing on our own nodes. I get a little bit fiery about it. So I appreciate that you're actually, Alex, you're actually taking a deep look at it. So I'm sorry if I get a little bit intense about it, but I think more people need to be looking deeply into it to better understand, because if Bitcoin is the future of money for 1,000 years, the changes that we make today will be talked about for 1,000 years. And this is a very big change. You're talking about the largest change to Bitcoin's ability to store data on the chain in its history that actually is going to go through. And there's nothing we can do about it unless we actually switch to a different implementation. We were able to do something about the block size wars because it was a change to the consensus rules. So the nodes actually had to say, yeah, we like this. We don't have any authority here because the implementation's on 99% of the nodes, and what they say goes at this point. So it's a totally different dynamic, but it's a huge change to Bitcoin. And just going back to SegWit, like SegWit was a mild change to unlock a huge feature. This is a huge change, and there's not really an understanding of exactly like why it's happening, other than it's like technically better to have the data be over here. But we all know that there's going to be a lot of second and third order effects of making these types of big changes that we can't even predict. But we're being told that this is okay and we should just go along with it, and there's nothing we can do about it. And screw you if you want to go over to to Bitcoin Knots. We don't care.
Yeah, I don't. Just for the record, we don't apologize for being intense about intense things, because that's the nature of intense things. But I think honestly, like I hadn't phrased it in my head quite the way that you said about the specificity of rules, like in and around Bitcoin as it stands from its inception. That's a very good point. And two, it really does kind of drive me back to my personal hunch that I've had, from the beginning, which has been that I like Bitcoin the way that Bitcoin is, from what I understand of it, which could of course be deepened. But it always just struck me that like, if I was really into the idea of experimentation and breaking shit and trying this and adding this and doing this, like that to me is exactly why I like Ethereum. And that's exactly why I enjoy those platforms, because it feels like that was built to be a place where I was intended to show up and iterate and fuck this up or succeed at that, or this turns out to be a bad idea, or this turns out to be a good idea, or whatever. And that's in the nature of how that ecosystem was constructed. Again, this is like my personal opinion and analysis of the whole thing, but like that's why I like more than one thing.
I'm not an ETH guy, but I 100% agree with you. Bitcoin was not meant to be changed rapidly. It was meant to be changed extremely slowly. That's why it's so radically decentralized. And that's good because it forces there to be very wide consensus for changes to Bitcoin. And so if you degrade or if you damage decentralization, you reduce the amount of consensus that's needed in order to make changes. And that's very, very, very dangerous for something that is supposedly supposed to be, I mean, according to me, and according to a lot of the people that believe in this stuff, supposed to be the backbone of the next financial era. You want to make changes that are for your business model. Like, I'm just sorry, like, I don't really care about your ability to, run DeFi on Bitcoin. Like, go do it on Ethereum, like go do it on Solana, go do it on Ripple. There's so many platforms that were built for you to move fast and break things.
Exactly.
Those platforms are a lot like tech, move fast, break it. Bitcoin move very slow and never break a single thing. Because if you were to break something in Bitcoin, I mean, you could set this technology back to the point where it never recovers. I mean, we
Yeah.
get one shot. Like, you're never going to be able to do Bitcoin again. So playing around with it to me is a very deep concern.
Just to put a pin in that, for people who may not understand why, because they see something like Caspa, which is a proof of work network that's supposed to be the next Bitcoin, to accumulate, like, through serendipity, circumstance, and fortune, the network effects, meaning all these people use Bitcoin, trust it, and not just people, but institutions, governments, to do the work that Dennis and Satoshi Action have done to advance it to become this kind of idea that is bigger than so many people's lives, is a very difficult thing, even for the smartest people working together to replicate. I mean, how hard is it for 10 people to keep a secret about their friend's surprise birthday party? Now imagine you've got 63,000 node operators and millions of people who are trying to make this thing work, and you have a pretty good idea of how hard it is. So, I think it's difficult to overstate it. Dennis, you've been really generous with your time. We want to get you out of here so you can enjoy the sunset, but I do want to ask you, what is the best place for people? It's a conversation that's been going on for 15 years. So it's really hard to just show up and be like, hi, I'm new here. What's going on? And participate the way that you are. But it's open. For somebody who wants to get in touch with this, would you recommend they go to Bitcoin Talk or the dev mailing list or the GitHub? Where does somebody go to start observing and thinking about participating in this conversation, even as an observer or listener?
Well, first of all, they should be listening to your show and listening to your individual TikToks and making sure that they subscribe. So, what are we? We're on TikTok now. Send some roses to these guys. They do the Lord's work out here on TikTok, which is not as primary of a platform for Bitcoin and digital asset discussions as Twitter, but I wish a lot more of it would be over here. I always keep thinking, man, I should spend more time on TikTok, but I just have a lot.
Now we're on.
You're welcome here all the time, Dennis.
Yeah, you just show up. You kick off your shoes, man. You're welcome.
You can come by whenever you want.
I appreciate it, and that's why I happily accept the invites when they come, because I love to be on different platforms, and I love to be able to do these conversations, which are a little bit more like off the cuff and not so strenuous and live. It's a good time. So I'm probably not the best person to ask when it comes to the normie interest in education. I don't mean that in a negative way, but just like,
I'm gonna gwump you. Where do you go to participate in this? Are you in a secret Telegram chat somewhere? You're in an open forum, aren't you?
I'm a self-taught person. So I was reading Mastering Bitcoin till the cover fell off. I was watching anything I could get my hands onto, reading anything I could get my hands onto, to be able to educate myself and to be able to develop my opinions about Bitcoin. I don't tend to do a lot of forum discussions. Even when I was back in the day when it was all on Reddit, I would just listen and watch and read. I didn't really comment a whole lot. But Reddit has really not since been the best place for education. And Twitter for a while was, but it's just such a slop over there right now, man. It's gosh, every time I go on there, it's just bombings here, famine there, crisis over there. And it's much more difficult to get that fine-tuned sort of educational. So that's why I say I'm not the best person to ask about this, because it's I spend so much time just trying to educate lawmakers which is such a different approach than sort of just an average American who wants to learn about the technology. So that's the only reason why I say I'm not the best, because I'm not the most up to date on where to go. I've already sort of reached my maximum Bitcoin journey. I'm still learning things all the time, but it's I'm at the tip of the spear in my space of Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I'm never going to be the technical expert.
No.
I'm never going to be, someone who's a coding expert at building an app, or the financial side, someone who understands
nodes.
someone who understands BlackRock and all that. I understand policy. I'm very good at it. If you wanted me to educate you on how to pass a bill into law, I could tell you much better than the what's that film, that little clip that we used to all watch when we were kids with the how to pass a bill.
Just a bill.
Schoolhouse Rock. Yeah. So it's much harder than that, actually. So, I mean, I would honestly recommend that they listen to folks like you on where to go for those types of educational efforts.
Well, and we will do our diligence, and we will find whoever you are, whatever your interests are, where those forums are, so you can observe more of those conversations. I think of Bitcoin Talk as a place the Bitcoin community gathers. There is a mailing list for the developers where a lot of proposals are initiated. We can put all that stuff in the links in the show notes. But guys, do you have any final questions for Dennis? And Dennis, do you have any final thoughts for our audience? Alex, you got a question in your eyes. I can see it. or a twinkle?
Not a question, just as much as the fact that actually the last time I reached out to Dennis to ask if he wanted to come back, he was like, "Oh yeah, if you're not bored with me yet." I made that sound when I read that DM coming back. I just wanted to say thank you, Dennis, for your time, because these are super interesting. You're one of those people that I learn something from every single time you show up and every single time you talk. And my offer to get your coffee in DC is 100% genuine. I don't know that we've ever necessarily had this conversation, but like I shaped the entire trajectory of my whole life from the time I was in high school, was to end up in DC and end up in politics. And that was my whole plan. It was everything that pushed me through college, and I made those decisions there. It's why I enlisted. It's why I worked in areas of the military that I wish that in retrospect I had not worked in, because I don't feel good about the stuff there, but law enforcement stuff and all that shit. And then slowly over time throughout that period, I kind of got pushed away from it and wanted to get more into, honestly, where you're at, advocacy and education. And it just always bothered me that Congress, because I was always going to go for Senate. That was like the dream from as long as I can remember. Like I was going to run for Senate someday. And then I just got to the point where I was like, you know what? I don't see enough change being actually affected from them. And it's going to be the people who can like effectively reach into that machine and do something. Mm-hmm. And so I have a lot of respect for what you do, because that is quite literally just like what in an ideal world, that's what I'd be doing. I mean, I wrote an open letter to Elizabeth Warren the first time she came out with a staunch position opposed. It didn't get to her, of course, but it was a genuine offer to show up for free. Like I'd pay my way.
Also?
No, in Georgia right now, but I lived all over the place. But no, and she was just one that I had become interested in for, the progressive stance a long time ago, and then become disenfranchised through the years because of what I take to be bad opinions on stuff like this primarily. So that was a very long-winded way of saying thank you for being here, because it's super enlightening to hear you talk about the work you're doing.
I really appreciate that, Alex. We should definitely connect. I'll send you my phone number. I'm kind of in the same camp, but anybody that pays attention to politics or is a political junkie, they're always like thinking about when or if they'd ever run. So of course, yes. I've always thought about those questions as well myself. And I've ultimately really come to this place now where it's like, I can have a much bigger impact on the political space for the issues that I care about by being on the outside. I'm sure you've heard that line before. It's like, you know, you have a bigger impact on stuff you care about by working from outside than from within. At the end of the day, when you're within, you have to care about a whole lot of other issues, and you have to care about what your constituents want more than you care about what you want a lot of times. Hopefully you can really good, smart lawmakers can blend those things together, but it's difficult. And then it's, then you got to go run somewhere that is in alignment with your viewpoints. You got to be able to beat someone in the primary, beat someone in the general. I mean, it's a lot of work to get elected. And so we've been really blessed, to be honest. It's a dream of my life to be able to be engaged like this politically. Many people try. I tried even multiple times to engage politically, and it just never really came together. So many people try and don't get to where we're at. So we're really honored to be able to be in this place where we're viewed as a trusted resource. And yeah, I'd be happy to have you come around with me and help me go to some of these offices.
God, that'd be fucking awesome.
The coffee does suck, though. I'll tell you that. So
Dennis, you have to get this man to put on a collared fucking shirt, though. All right, he's gonna walk around looking like an intern. And you can't have that on Capitol Hill.
Alex cleans up really well. These guys are hot.
Listen,
no, this is the current look. This is like staffers. They love the hair back and like the beard. Like
Dennis,
all you need is a suit and tie, and you'll be fine.
My mother's going to be so disappointed.
Listen, Will, I do have a black jacket with a black shirt and a black tie. So
well, I mean, I knew it'd be black.
I look like I'm in the Addams family, but it is a suit technically. So.
That's good.
Working on it. Well, hit me up on Twitter. I know that's how we tend to DM each other, and
absolutely,
I'll be around. I mean, I've got multiple trips coming up to DC, so
I'm there 100%.
Dennis, have you got a final thought for us? I know people can find you on X at Dennis_Porter_. They can find Satoshi Action Fund at so what's the app for
Satoshi Act Fund. They didn't let us have the one that we wanted, so we had to go with Satoshi Act Fund
or SatoshiAction.io, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. You can go there. People can check out our work and hopefully support us if they feel that we're doing cool enough stuff for Bitcoin. So final thought would be in the line of what Alex is saying here. It's like, if you feel like it's important for your country to be the best place in the world for Bitcoin and digital assets, like you just got to stand up and start making a difference. And that can happen by asking to come along with me to Washington D.C., or you could do it by going there yourself and or writing letters, or really ultimately, like what we found for a lot of people is that the political space is wrought with landmines, especially if you go to the federal level. Just the difference between like how you speak about things can get you not invited back for second meeting. But it's still important for them to hear from their constituents, no matter what. Even if you go in there and you're just roughly polite and you say you support the stuff, even if you don't say all the right words, like that's an important thing to do. So, but the other thing that we found is that a lot of people really want there to be changes made. They see the value of the work that we're doing, and so what we do is we act as a pass through for them. Is like if you want to see a difference be made, you can support groups like Satoshi Action and others too as well that are doing this work, and it gives you a way to be in touch with what's going on and support what's going on without having to show up every day in a suit and turn into a suit coiner like me. I don't know if that's a term yet on TikTok, but everyone jokes about us being suit coiners. Everyone, because it's very much a bottom up grassroots cypherpunk movement. Now all the suits are here. So, but yeah, all jokes aside, this stuff matters, and if you care about it, there's a number of different ways to get involved. And if you have questions about it, get involved. You can reach out to us, and we'll help guide you in the right direction.
Dennis, before you go ahead, one other final question you just reminded me of. Nation state level, outside of the US, what other countries are the leading or close to leading from a Bitcoin adoption standpoint? Obviously El Salvador and others, but like new ones.
I was really in touch with this for a while. I was actually traveling, trying to generate a lot more interest, and it was working pretty well. But if you can imagine, I'm flying from across the country to go to DC, but imagine flying on, international every other week. It was just rough. And so I took a step back from that, but there was some very good progress made. We see some great efforts in Switzerland, in Chile. We had really great conversations with folks in Germany. And there was one other one. There's some stuff going on in Canada right now, actually. So that's good. And we're just trying to, what we do is we just try to offer ourselves as like a support system for those groups. Because when I tried to lead the tip, like Samson Mao, like the way he travels around, talks to all these people, I'm like, I don't know how you do it, man. Because that international travel is just, and I'm good with jet lag. It's not even that bad. It's just grueling the amount of time you're on a plane and not on a comfortable bed and not eating good food and not sleeping well. So yeah, I had to take a step back from it, unfortunately. But hopefully in the future, we're able to lean more into the international side again. I mean, we are, but it's like less aggressive. You know what I mean?
Sure. No, makes sense. Yeah. The United States market also demands a lot of attention. And when you're in the US market, it's just easy. And also just being in the US market, that's plenty of travel already.
Yeah. It's a big country.
It's a pretty big country.
It's like 3 times the size of Europe or something like that. I mean, I can't remember the exact number, but like Europe fits inside the United States like 2 or 3 times. So it's a massive country. And a lot of 50 states, a lot of states to go to do work. And the other big thing is really too, is like, I'm a citizen here, so I can actually like really do a lot of stuff that I can't do in other countries. Like I can't lobby the same, otherwise I'm going to go to jail probably in these other countries. So you have to be really careful with how much time you spend lobbying foreign governments.
True.
Yeah, definitely.
That's a good
one
point.
or 2 laws about that.
Yeah. I've not thought about it, but makes sense.
Well, I know what the laws are for the U.S. You can get in big trouble for lobbying the U.S. government there's rules for how to do it, but you can really get yourself in trouble. So, but happy to be an educational resource for all those folks.
Well, we really appreciate it, brother. And we can't wait to have you back for number 4. Hopefully we get you and Alex in DC live, and you'll be sipping your coffee, walking from the Lincoln Memorial all the way back to the Hill. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, Dennis Porter. We'll see you next time, Dennis.
See you, Dennis.
And for all of you, my friends here, we've just got a couple of minutes left before I tally up the point totals. We give our very final thoughts, and we ride our dogs and ponies into the sunset. So if you got a last minute question, suggestion, good joke, word of wisdom, let us know. Leave it in the comments, and then find us and connect with us on your favorite social. We're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn, we're on TikTok, we're on X, we're on every podcast platform. We've got playlists, and we are going to be live again tomorrow at 7 a.m. Central Standard Time. We have got so much good stuff, and all of it is waiting for you at the riseupmorningshow.com. Go there, find us, and like us. Really, really like us. Guys, we had a couple rapid fires that I'm glad to get to, but the very first question somebody asked out of the gate is one that only Will can answer.
Yes.
And I wonder if you can tell us, Will, as we shift from Bitcoin only to like macro and crypto, what's going on with the big macro day we had? What did Jay Powell say? Somebody said he was looking shady.
No, Jerome Powell just looks tired and annoyed.
He is tired and annoyed. Okay.
That's Jerome Powell. He's tired and annoyed because he has to answer the same questions that he gets asked every single day.
I'm tired too, Jerome.
So Jerome Powell, who's the head of the Fed is the central bank of the United States. The central bank of the United States sets monetary policy. Why do we care about that? Before I talk about what we did or what happened today, we care about monetary policy because it affects the amount of liquidity in the market. What is the amount of liquidity in the market? Is the amount of dollar bills floating around. Why do we care about that? If there are more dollar bills floating around in the market, assets tend to go up in value because there's more money around. There's more money to invest in assets. So what affects that? Rate cuts. Rate cuts make the amount of money to increase, right? Because it makes it cheaper to borrow money. There's other things the Fed can do as well, but that's like one of their big levers. They only have a few options, right? So we were looking today for the Fed to make a decision on to cut rates or not. There was a 97% chance that the Fed was not going to do anything. If you want to see where that 97% came from, go to the CME Fed Watch. It is the most trusted source for the best odds as decided upon and calculated by financial analysts across all financial markets in the US. It is more accurate than Polymarket, which gets put on Twitter a lot. So this was not a surprise. It was not a surprise at all to see that no rate cuts were going to come out. So that happened at 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. At 2:30 Eastern Standard Time, Jerome Powell came out and made a statement and answered questions. In that, he said, hey, we decided to not cut rates yet because the U.S. economy is strong and inflation isn't at our 2% target yet. For those of you who are unaware, core inflation is at 2.5%. So we're close. We're almost there. We're not there yet. And Jerome Powell said this is the first month where we first saw tariffs have an impact. We at the Fed believe that tariffs should only have a one-time price increase seen at the consumer level, but we want to monitor it to make sure that tariffs don't have a multiple price impact, right? So we want to just see how the data comes in, make sure it's just a one-time increase. And then after that, we're good, right? And then somebody asked him, well, Jerome Powell, what are the odds of us getting multiple rate cuts this year? You said that's something that's a possibility. He said the Fed does not have any predetermined plan on what we're going to do with rates. We analyze the data as it comes in and we make decisions afterward. The market was a little upset by that answer because he could have made it a little bit nicer and been like, yeah, we'd love to do 2 rate cuts, but it's dependent on the data. But no, he said we have no predetermined set path. And the markets were like, meh, that's not what I wanted to hear exactly. And then hang on, my autistic macroeconomic update is almost done, Alex. And
no, you're good.
And then the markets went meh a little bit, but then the markets went, hey, like immediately afterwards. And now Bitcoin's up by 0.23% and everything's up again because everyone realized that rate cuts are probably still coming later this year. It's just dependent on the data and yada, yada, yada. So that is your macro update.
For everybody in podcast land, I just put up a picture of the face Jerome Powell made as he basically said, fact check yourself, brother. And it's a real stank face.
Yeah, it's great.
To be fair though, that man gets asked basically the same question in a whole bunch of different costumes
every
and
day.
He gives the same answer every single time.
Every
and
time.
It is always like, we are going to do whatever is appropriate with the data that we are given. And then people are like, yeah, but what if you did this? And he's like, well, if that's what the data wants, then that's what I'll do. And they're like, yeah, but what about this? And he's like, again. And so it's just like, it's
the data. And then they're like, so what are your thoughts about Trump trying to fire you? And he's like, he can't, and I won't resign for the 5 millionth time.
Yeah, he is me
So
getting
tired.
asked for my thoughts on XRP for the 800th time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And everyone in the receiving end is just like,
So you're telling me there's a chance?
And you know what? I'll say this. I have actually seen a little bit more content pop up on crypto Twitter of people being like, maturing is realizing that, you know what, Jerome Powell is actually doing a really great job, and cutting rates right now would be too soon. And I'm just like, yes, correct. Cutting rates would be too soon. We're like right there. You know, waiting another month or two, it's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. But if you want to check out the odds of the next rates, decisions resulting in cuts, you can go to the CME Fed Watch, and you can even look at October, November, and December's Fed meetings and see what the odds are. And the odds are pretty good that we're going to have one, maybe even two rate cuts before the end of this year still. So it's going to be fine. And the reason why I say I agree with Jerome Powell's decisions is because, inflation, it's not the inflation data per se. It's just the uncertainty of how tariffs are going to shake things up. And we only have 1 month's worth of data of how tariffs are actually impacting prices. And that's not enough of a sample size to make such an important decision on the possible continued inflation of your currency that would decimate all lower and middle income households in America. It's just not a set of dice that you want to roll on, So just wait an extra month or two, and then you can make a better decision. So, why not do that? The risk to reward isn't there,
Beautiful. We've got 2 rapid fire questions, and I'm going to do my best to answer the second one. The first one is a toss up for whoever wants to take it. Since we talked a lot about Bitcoin tonight, somebody wanted to know what actually happens when you buy Bitcoin. Like, who do you buy it from, and how does Bitcoin get its price? Who wants to take it?
Well, there are people who buy Bitcoin and people who sell Bitcoin. And when Bitcoin price not good enough, not people sell. And then prices get better to make more people want sell. And that market work how?
Correct.
Beautiful.
I'd say it killed it, but
so you
I mean, what I said is exactly how
that's
a free
exactly
market
right.
works. That's
I'm
exactly how a free market works.
To say the only ways to get Bitcoin are to mine it, to participate, being one of those node operators who Dennis talked about mines by attempting to guess a number. Approximately every 10 minutes, a very complex random number is guessed, and the computer who guesses it, their operator, is awarded Bitcoin. And because the number is dynamically adjusted depending on how many people are guessing, and now that a lot of people are guessing with supercomputers, it's very, very, very expensive to guess that number right. And so if you get a couple of Bitcoin for guessing that number, you're not going to sell it for more than it cost you to get it. And those people are also incentivized by the fact that Bitcoin is more popular than ever before. It's in higher demand than ever before. It's like a tank of water that's emptying over time, and more people want to drink. So they can sell it to you. People who already own it like us can sell it to you. And folks like Coinbase have made a business around accumulating Bitcoin for a long time so that they can sell it to you based on what the market determines the price to be. And that's how they get the price. Is at any given moment, the miners are willing to sell or not. At any given moment, the people holding it are willing to sell or not. And folks like Coinbase are willing to sell or not at a given price. And based on the aggregate data of all the price in a particular marketplace, we have what we call the spot price of Bitcoin, where if you are willing to sell at that price, somebody will probably buy it. Technically, you could sell Bitcoin for $1 million trillion. Nobody would buy it. If you sold it for $1 a coin, everybody would snatch it right up. The market price is sort of the aggregated price that the buyers and sellers acting together have determined is right. You don't have to do that work in your head. We have calculators and algorithms and things that put it all together for us so that all you got to do is click the button if the price seems right.
Also, I want to make it clear, I was not answering the question that way to make fun of whoever asked that question. That's a great question to ask. I was simply answering it that way because I really, really, really enjoy describing how markets work in the simplest, dumbest way possible that is still accurate, because it's just fun and it's also the God's honest truth. And so many people like to complicate things that in reality are so simple. But Evan, you added I was just about to say, but Evan, you added really great context of how the things work actually.
Thank you. People do overcomplicate it, and the details are only as helpful.
Snooty elitist little douche.
God damn it. Yeah. And then the other one is very simple. If you've been scammed, the most important thing to do is not to try and make that money back in crypto. It's not a get rich quick scheme. The most important thing to do is One, you should report it. Some places you can report it are the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission at ftc.gov, IC3.gov, which is the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, and your local authorities. It is very unlikely that money that is stolen, lost, hacked, whatever from cryptocurrency scams is recovered, but those are the steps you should take. And then you should get in a community. And the community we have is here at the show and also through all the links at the riseupmorningshow.com. We've got a global community of learners at all levels of experience, many of whom have been deceived by scammers and who understand what to look for now and will never fall for it again. So we want you in that group. If you've been scammed, it can be very isolating, but don't allow that to keep you from sharing your story with somebody else who could benefit from it. We're all better together when we learn, grow, and we say, rise up. All right, my friends, are you ready to do a little points total and a little final thought?
Yes.
Okay. Here we go. Alex, get the list at the ready. I'm thinking we should do a pack of Courtyard cards
Yes.
to a premium member tonight. And then, maybe something else. If you missed this earlier.
Just remember, if it's a really cool card, I get to keep it.
If you missed it today, we had the folks at Courtyard. The largest.
You can have the wrapper.
Hell yeah. They're the largest buyers of collectible cards in the world. They've moved into comics recently, and they're about to move into coins. You can get these super digital cards that are all backed by a physical item, secured in a vault, held by Brinks. They will deliver it to you if you want to exchange the token for your item and display it on your shelf like Will does. And they even gave us a cool discount code so that if you don't win tonight, you can go to courtyard.io and you can use the code RISEUP15 to get 15% off any packs you might buy. But it's a great episode. You want to check it out for sure. Fellas, here's how the points stand now. No negative points tonight.
Wow.
Congratulations, everybody, for staying in the positive. With 1 point, we have got Solemn for being the SAR of gifts. We have got Elo for knowing the definition of de minimis. We've got 2112 Crypto for understanding there is a better way. Tech CEO has 3 points for being a great mod, which means in third place. With 4 points, it's me, ladies and gentlemen.
I thought I was going to be in third. I really did.
In second place, you have tied with Alex. And actually, I'm kind of thinking I might bump it down. I might go down to fourth place. Will, I'm going to give you third place tonight. And I'm going to give Alex another ding.
For what?
Because Dennis looked at him and said, Alex, I'll give you my phone number. And then Alex's face somebody pointed out, Dinesh in the comments said, you could just see Alex light up. So for getting those digits and helping out future policymakers, Alex is getting second place, which means our winner tonight was, how could you beat him? Dennis Porter of Satoshi Action with 10 points. You just can't beat it. So Alex, do you want to tell me, will you pick a number between 1 and 86, and let's find out who among our premium members will win this fabulous prize?
24.
24.
24 is
Stall.
Oh no!
Hello, honey. Hello, my darling. Hello, my ragtime.
I just wanted to hear Will sing the ragtime song.
I do love that you are always ready to go with that song.
Always, dude. Ever since I first saw it in Spaceballs at like the age of 5.
He's just waiting. All right, I do
24.
I do have a winner. Yes. The winner tonight is Philip Piano.
Philip Piano, congratulations. You are the winner. Please send us a message. Put it in Discord, send it in a DM, write it on the back of a $20 bill.
I'll tag him. They'll open a help ticket.
He'll tag you. And gentlemen, I think it's time to do a round of final thoughts. Everybody in the audience says congratulations.
Oh, we don't get to open up the card on stream? Well, I guess it's his, but yeah. But
this is, when you get your money bridged, we can do a whole bonus stream of you cracking.
I will open it live. Luckily Nico expedited my KYC, so I know it's being reviewed.
What did you
I know, right? He was great. So it is.
What
it's
a
being reviewed
subtle
now.
flex to say the CEO of Courtyard is expediting your KYC.
I know, right? I'm an influencer, guys. I'm a key opinion leader.
But also, you said you were going to spend $3,000 on his platform, so
No, $2,600.
I'm very sorry.
Hashtag centralized.
And then I almost guarantee you, it's like, and here's a Rattata. Like, I'll still get it and be like, hell yeah.
Oh my gosh. Gentlemen,
Wumps for Rattata.
Wumps for Rattata. Yeah. Have you got a final thought for us? Will, you go first since you're under the weather still, and I want you to preserve your energy. Or Alex, you can go first.
Hello, my darling. Hello. No. Final thoughts. So I was trying not to laugh a little bit, because I had this mental image pop in my head while Dennis was talking, and this was of Alex being his coffee boy, and I just imagine Dennis sitting down, and he would just like. He's having a very important conversation with a senator or a congressman or woman, and then grabs his coffee and takes a sip. And as he puts it down, just Alex, who's crouched in the back corner with his back turned, so he's not a distraction, and he's kneeling down, hovering over his potato that he plays with, feels the disturbance in the coffee force, and then sprints over. And then I was imagining a utility belt of still warm coffees that have a battery attached to it so that it could keep all the coffees for him. And he goes, "Oh yes, Mr. Porter, here's your coffee, sir." And then he takes that coffee and just goes back into the corner, back to play with his potato again. And he just has the sixth sense of whenever Dennis took a sip of coffee to then just immediately come over every single time and replace it with a new fresh coffee off of his utility belt. And I was like,
concocted this whole thought.
Great. Immediately. It wasn't like something I casually thought up. It was just, oh, I'll get your coffee. And I was like,
so I'm
exactly like this. Your coffee Batman, but like very, very
but like the Robin
and shy.
I didn't get coffee Batman from that. I got potato Smeagol from that.
I mean, that's way more accurate. Yeah.
Representation of the facts.
Potato Smeagol, but like very.
Why am I crouching?
Because you don't want to be a distraction.
Why can't I have a chair?
You want to be no, because that's not your role, Potato Smeagol, coffee boy.
I regret saying the phrase potato Smeagol.
Oh God, we have an SPX scammer on YouTube.
Oh no!
Oh no!
We had a good run.
They made it to YouTube.
Damn it!
Oh God. Anyway, that's my final thought.
Beautiful. Alex.
Evan regrets giving you a final thought.
Yeah, he probably does.
Alex inviting you on the show, but I am frankly thrilled. The ratings are going to go through the roof for that segment. So
yeah, let the record show I did recruit Will, and I'm sorry.
This is true. And I'm sorry.
What have I done? Now I'm potato Smeagol.
Yeah.
Sell this thing.
This thing is just me.
That was what I thought. I was searching for that sound when Dennis said, "I never sell my Bitcoin."
Yeah.
It's like, hell yeah, bro.
For my final thought, it's not potato Smeagol. I'm going to answer the question, who do you not listen to? Because there was a comment on YouTube, in the world of content creators, who do you not listen to? No need to name any names. The personality, the profile of the individual that you do not want to follow, that you do not want to get your information from, is someone who believes unequivocally that they are right about everything, acts as if they have nothing to learn, lacks humility, and shames you for not paying attention to them sooner. That last one is my single biggest pet peeve. I see it all the time, wherein like the marketing strategy of the shittiest influencers is, wow, you really screwed up by not finding me earlier. And wow, only putzes didn't listen to me when I said blah before, or whatever. Like, builds credibility by making you feel bad for not paying attention to them. And then also just is the most arrogant piece of shit ever. Like, just talks with this air of condescension that it's just like, I learned it all. I've got nothing to learn. I am not on a learning journey of any kind. You're lucky to be hearing from me now, and I'm going to tell you the way that it is. It's so gross. I hate it so much. If anyone, you know who I'm talking about. There's more than one. If anyone talks to you like that through a video, That's a swipe for sure.
Mhm.
We got names in the chat, including from Linda, my Bitcoin millionaire son-in-law. So watch out for him. That was good wisdom. Dinesh says, William's description of Alex reminded me of a ball boy in tennis.
Yes.
I'll take that over Potato Smeagol.
I am a big fan of this.
Oh my gosh. And my final thought is to say thank you, all of you, for being the very best part of what we do. Wherever you are, whenever you listen, this show is your show. And of all the places in all the world that you could be, we're so glad you chose to spend time with us now. We got to ride our cats. We got to ride our cows into the sunrise, but you can catch us right back here tomorrow at 7 a.m.
Such a good
Central
sound.
Standard Time. You can find all the past recordings, including our previous episodes with Dennis. You can find all the other links to all our other socials, the PDF guides we've published, the live courses, the recordings, and the Discord community. The always free to join and fun to hang around in Rise Up Discord server, which will soon migrate to Circle, a new, better than ever, safer than Discord community platform we cannot wait to introduce you to. Shout out to all the mods who've already joined. We are really, really excited to open
Well,
the door
shout out
everybody.
to the Evan who put the whole goddamn thing together and has gone to I don't know how many meetings with our Circle representative
I appreciate
and has just done a tremendous amount of work to put that thing together. So when you get in there and see it, know that it's 97% because of that.
Not that much. You guys really dragged a lot of me over the finish line last week, and I really couldn't have done it without you. And we wouldn't have done it if it wasn't for all the people who support the show, who make it possible for us to come here every day, who trust us to help them learn. So, you know, our success, my work, it's just a reflection of that. We work for you guys. So again, thank you for being the very best part of what we do. We got to go. Until next time, everybody.
Bright and
Stay
early.
safe. Be well. My friends, rise up.
Bye-bye.